There's a moment in life that arrives quietly, not with fireworks, not with applause, just a sudden stillness inside you. The kind that feels like an exhale you didn't realize you've been holding for years. And in that stillness, you notice something almost strange. The weight of other people's opinions no longer feels so heavy. It's not that you've become indifferent or cold. It's that something inside of you has finally grown strong enough to carry its own meaning. But reaching that point isn't simple. It takes years of being shaped by expectations, judged silently or openly, guided by the invisible hands of approval and disapproval. And then one day, you watch a person walk into a room, speak their truth without hesitation, hold themselves with quiet certainty, and you wonder almost in disbelief, how do they not care what anyone thinks? There is a psychology behind these people, those who move through life with an inner steadiness that doesn't depend on applause. And the more you understand it, the more you realize these people aren't fearless. They're just free in a way most people never allow themselves to be. And the story of why they're free begins long before the world ever notices. Most people spend their lives in a kind of quiet performance, not on a stage, not in front of cameras, but in daily life, adjusting their voice so they sound agreeable, adjusting their dreams so they look realistic, adjusting their personality so they don't stand out too much. Every adjustment is small, almost invisible, but together they form a mask. And once the mask is on for too long, people forget it's a mask at all. But there is another type of person, someone who goes through that same pressure, that same conditioning, that same urge to be accepted, and at some point, something inside them snaps, not in a destructive way, but in a deeply human way. They reach a crossroads, pretend or live, and they choose to live. That choice is the turning point. It changes the architecture of their self-worth. They stop outsourcing their confidence to the world around them. Most people say, "I don't care what people think." But the truth is they do. They just say it because they wish it were true. But those who genuinely don't care in the same way others do. They didn't decide it out of pride. They decided it out of necessity. They realized something profound. You lose yourself far faster than you lose other people's opinions. Every psychologist will tell you that human beings are wired for social belonging. It's part of our survival code. But here's the part most people don't realize. The brain treats opinions like a survival threat. Being judged triggers a stress response. Being rejected activates the same emotional circuitry once tied to physical danger. That's why caring about what others think feels so natural, and breaking free from it feels almost impossible. But the ones who do break free, they learn something the rest of the world forgets. You don't erase the fear, you outgrow it. And the story of how they outgrow it begins with discomfort. The discomfort of trying too hard. The discomfort of losing sleep over what someone said. The discomfort of shrinking themselves to stay likable. Eventually that discomfort becomes louder than the discomfort of being judged. And when that happens, something shifts. There is a day, an ordinary day, when they look at themselves in the mirror and realize they have never heard their own voice clearly. They've heard the version shaped by expectations, obligations, and invisible rules, but not their real voice. And once that realization appears, they can't ignore it. People who don't care about opinions don't wake up with magical confidence. They wake up tired of being controlled by invisible reviewers. So they choose authenticity, not because it's glamorous, but because pretending has become too heavy. And here's what's unexpected. The moment they choose authenticity, something in their psychology recalibrates. When they speak, the approval they used to chase no longer feels like oxygen. And because they no longer need it, people trust them more. That's the paradox. When you stop begging for validation, you become the kind of person others validate naturally. The world senses inner freedom. It senses when someone isn't shaped by fear, and people feel drawn to that. But that's only one layer. There is another part of the psychology of those who don't care about opinions. They've accepted something most people resist. They've accepted imperfection. When you truly accept that you will occasionally misunderstand others, occasionally fail, occasionally disappoint someone, occasionally look foolish, your anxiety about opinions loses power. Most people fear judgment because they fear being imperfect in public. But those who are free understand that imperfection is part of being human. And once you embrace that, opinions lose their sharpness. They are not fragile. They are not trying to be flawless. They are not trying to be admired. They are simply trying to be real. And real is harder than perfect because real requires courage. Another part of their psychology is this. They recognize that judgment is inevitable. You can be kind and still misunderstood. You can be quiet and still criticized. You can be generous and still doubted, but once you understand judgment is unavoidable, you stop shaping your life around it. There is a certain freedom in realizing that no matter how carefully you live, someone will always interpret your actions through their own lens. And that lens has nothing to do with you. People who don't care about opinions have also learned this. People judge from their perspective, not from truth. If someone sees confidence as arrogance, that's their lens. If someone sees silence as weakness, that's their lens. If someone sees ambition as showing off, that's their lens. And once you understand that every opinion is filtered through someone's experiences, fears, insecurities, and worldview, you stop taking it personally. They've also built something inside themselves that many people never develop, an internal compass. Instead of asking, will they approve? They ask, is this aligned with who I am? And that question frees them from the endless cycle of external validation. But here's the part that most people miss. These individuals still feel emotions, they still get nervous, they still feel pressure at times. They're not superhuman, they just have a different relationship with fear. They see fear as a signal, not a command. There is a subtle but powerful difference. Most people feel fear and interpret it as stop, change yourself, avoid judgment. But people who don't care interpret fear differently. This is uncomfortable, but it won't destroy me. That difference rewires their decision M. They don't avoid situations just because they may be judged. They move through them because they trust their ability to handle discomfort. And that trust is built slowly through small acts of honesty. Moments where they choose their truth over approval. Every time they do that, their internal confidence grows. Not loud confidence, quiet confidence, the kind that feels like calmness instead of noise. Another important psychological factor is this. They understand the transience of other people's thoughts. People think about you far less than you imagine. And even when someone judges you, that judgment lasts only seconds before their mind returns to their own concerns. Realizing that human attention is temporary is liberating, but there is an even deeper truth beneath all of this. People who don't care about opinions have learned to separate identity from image. Image is what the world sees. Identity is what you know yourself to be. When image becomes more important than identity, your life becomes a performance. But when identity becomes more important than image, you live from a place of strength. Here's something even more interesting. The less someone cares about opinions, the more they can form genuine relationships because they're not interacting from a place of fear or trying to be liked. They're interacting from a place of authenticity. And authenticity creates bonds that last longer than any performance ever could. But let's go deeper. A huge part of this psychology comes from childhood patterns. People who grow up constantly criticized or evaluated often become overly sensitive to opinions. But people who grew up encouraged to think independently or who had moments in life where they were forced to rely on their inner compass, they develop resilience to judgment. Some of the strongest individuals are not those who were praised growing up, but those who learn to survive without constant approval. This resilience carries into adulthood. It becomes mental strength, and mental strength expresses itself in subtle ways. Silence that isn't insecure, decisions made without explanation, boundaries set without guilt, and choices that prioritize inner peace over outer acceptance. People who don't care about opinions also practice something rare, emotional neutrality. When someone compliments them, they appreciate it, but don't cling to it. When someone criticizes them, they evaluate it, but don't absorb it. Their self-worth doesn't rise and fall with the world. It remains steady. This steadiness doesn't come from ego, it comes from clarity. Clarity about who they are, what they value, and what matters long-term. There is a certain peace in living that way, a peace that says, I am responsible for my actions, not for your interpretation of them. And when someone lives from that place, the world sees it, not as rebellion, not as arrogance, but as maturity. But the journey doesn't end here. There's another layer, a deeper one most people never discover, and it's the part that truly explains the psychology of those who live free from constant approval. They discover something most people overlook. The world is far more forgiving when you are aligned with yourself. The more you hide, the more people question you. The more you reveal your real nature, the more people relax around you. Authenticity has its own silent gravity. It draws the right people in, and it quietly filters out the ones who never belonged in your life anyway. But this level of authenticity doesn't come from stubbornness. It comes from a deep internal shift. The realization that life is short and pretending through it is a quiet tragedy. When you understand that, you begin to move differently. Every choice becomes intentional. Every moment becomes an expression of truth rather than a performance for approval. And here's something most people never admit. Caring too much about opinions is exhausting. It drains mental energy. It turns simple decisions, how to dress, what to say, what dream to pursue, into calculations. But people who break free from that exhaustion find a new kind of clarity. They stop searching for permission. They stop trying to fit into invisible molds. They stop feeling responsible for keeping up appearances. It's emotional intelligence, and emotional intelligence creates inner freedom. They have also learned the rare skill of being misunderstood without panicking. This is one of the highest forms of maturity because at some point every human being must confront a delicate truth. You cannot fully control how the world interprets you, and the moment you accept that truth, you stop shaping your life around interpretations. Imagine living in a way where misunderstanding doesn't uproot your self-worth, where criticism doesn't freeze your dreams, where judgment doesn't dictate your decisions. That is the life these individuals live. Not perfectly, not effortlessly, but consciously. And this consciousness shapes every part of their psychology. Another important aspect is boundaries. People who don't care about opinions are not rebellious for the sake of rebellion. They simply protect their emotional space. They don't allow guilt to dictate their choices. They don't say yes when they feel no. They don't sacrifice themselves to maintain peace. Instead, they create peace by honoring their boundaries. And here's something surprising. People respect those with boundaries far more than those who try to please everyone. Boundaries communicate self-respect, and self-respect silently teaches others how to treat you. This is why individuals who don't care about opinions often rise in life, personally, professionally, emotionally. They make decisions based on clarity, not fear. They pursue paths others hesitate to walk. They take risks others avoid. They create value because they're not held back by the invisible cage of expectation. Their courage looks natural, but it's built, not born. It is shaped by years of choosing difficult honesty over comfortable approval. But beneath all of this, there is a deeper layer, one that rarely gets spoken about. These individuals understand the impermanence of human judgment. Opinions change, people change, perceptions shift. What someone thinks of you today will transform tomorrow depending on their state of mind, their circumstances, their mood. Realizing this removes the illusion of permanence, and once the illusion is gone, fear loses its power. But perhaps the most profound part of this psychology is this. They have learned to give themselves the approval they once sought from others. Instead of waiting for the world to recognize their worth, they recognize it themselves. This inner recognition becomes their foundation. When you don't need the world to validate your identity, you stop negotiating with your self-respect, and that gives you a strength that cannot be taken away. But let's go deeper into the emotional core. People who don't care about opinions have made peace with their own contradictions. They know they are imperfect. They know they will make mistakes. They know they will outgrow some people and be outgrown by others. They know they will evolve beyond old versions of themselves, and instead of hiding these truths, they embrace them. This acceptance removes the pressure to appear flawless, and without that pressure, they are free to stay curious, free to learn, free to grow. Growth becomes easier when you're not afraid of how it looks. One of the greatest misunderstandings about people who don't care about opinions is the belief that they are disconnected. But the truth is they are deeply connected to purpose, to meaning, to self-respect, to inner values. They simply refuse to be controlled by external noise, and because of that, they develop a powerful ability. They can choose whose opinion actually matters. They don't close themselves off from feedback. They simply become selective. They listen to voices rooted in wisdom, not insecurity. Encouragement, not control. Guidance, not judgment. Truth, not projection. When someone lives this way, they carry a different kind of presence. A presence that feels grounded. A presence that feels calm. A presence that doesn't need to impress. They walk into a room not to be liked, but to be real. And this authenticity calms the room. It makes others feel safer being themselves. People sense when they are not being evaluated. They sense when someone is speaking from the heart. They sense when someone is not bending themselves for approval. And that sense creates trust. Authenticity is contagious. When one person lives honestly, it gives others silent permission to do the same. This is why people who don't care about opinions often become leaders. Even if they never intended to be, they are not followed because they demand it. They are followed because they carry an inner steadiness others wish they had. But this steadiness doesn't come without sacrifice. To reach this state, they had to let go of something precious, the illusion of universal approval. They had to accept that not everyone will understand them, not everyone will agree with them, not everyone will support their decisions. And that acceptance, difficult as it is, becomes the foundation of their freedom. Most people spend their lives trying to avoid being misunderstood, but those who don't care about opinions accept misunderstanding as part of the human condition. And this acceptance allows them to breathe easier. They stop suffocating under the weight of constant self-monitoring. There is a softness in them, but also a strength that comes from choosing authenticity again and again, even when it's not easy. And perhaps the most beautiful part of their psychology is this: they remain compassionate. They don't look down on those who still care about opinions. Instead, they understand that everyone is on their own journey. They know how difficult it is to break free. They know how deeply rooted the fear of judgment can be. They know how long it takes to hear your own voice through the noise of the world. Their compassion comes from experience. But even with all this understanding, they keep moving on their own path. They don't let the world decide their destination. They don't wait for approval to take a step. They understand that the meaning of life is not to be admired, but to be lived. And in living fully, they inspire others quietly, subtly, naturally. The psychology of people who don't care about others' opinions is not a story of rebellion. It's a story of liberation. It's the story of finding yourself after years of losing yourself in expectations. It's the story of choosing truth over performance, inner peace over outer applause, growth over approval. It's the story of becoming whole. And when you understand this psychology deeply, something inside you shifts too. You begin to realize that the freedom you admire in others has always been possible within yourself. It's not a gift given to a few. It's a choice available to anyone willing to face their own fears. And if you're listening closely, maybe a small part of you is already stepping into that freedom. Not loudly, not publicly, just quietly. The way real change always begins. It starts as a whisper. I don't have to live for their expectations. And once that whisper appears, it begins to grow slowly at first, then steadily. And one day, you wake up with the same inner steadiness you once admired in others. Because the truth is, the psychology of people who don't care about opinions is not about them. It's about the version of yourself you've been afraid to meet. The version of you who is free. The version of you who is no longer performing, no longer shrinking, no longer negotiating with your identity. The version of you who simply exists fully, honestly, unapologetically. And perhaps that version is closer than you think.